Havlicek steals it. Havlicek stole the ball. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
United to Amici powers in.
Won their 6th NBA championship.
Gibson, swing. This is gonna be a home run. Unbelievable! I don't believe what I just saw.
Hello, I'm Chris Fowler. Welcome to SportsCentury. Steve Carlton ruled his domain like a ninja warrior, mixing heat, precision, and movement with blinding effect. Although the 4-time Cy Young Award winner expressed his talent with fastballs and sliders, the eye of that talent lay in a mind as foreign to baseball as geometry is to chewing tobacco. Never was that eye more focused than in the summer of 1972.
1972 was the most amazing year I can remember in my 60 years of baseball. Every time he pitched, we felt we were going to win, and every time he didn't pitch, we felt we were going to lose.
His comment was, today's win day. He would say that every single start. Today's win day. And that spread throughout our baseball team. We really felt when he was on that mound, we couldn't lose.
He won 27 games on a team that won 59 ball games. So, I mean, he was the Philadelphia Phillies that year.
Koufax could win 27 games, but with the first-place team. And he's winning that many with the last-place team. It's not only the best season he ever had, it's one of the best seasons any pitcher has ever had.
In 1972, Carlton accounted for 46% of Philadelphia's victories, the largest share by any pitcher in history. With 310 strikeouts and a 1.98 earned run average, he won pitching's Triple Crown and his first Cy Young Award.
When you say lefty, and everyone in both leagues knows exactly who you're talking about, the pitcher must be pretty good. And what made this pitcher, Carlton, so great was a slider.
You dreaded getting 2 strikes on you, because you knew that eventually, at some point in time during that at-bat, you were going to get that slider that's going to break down on your back foot.
Swing and a miss. A slider down and in, and he struck him out.
I can remember the first time I caught him, it was just like, wow, this is what it's supposed to be like. He had a slider that, if you swung at it, it disappeared in the dirt, and if you took it, it stayed right there for a strike.
This thing actually had as much break in the hitting zone as any pitcher, and it looks good. It looks like you got it, and it just goes right on out of the hitting area.
I always thought there wasn't a lefty alive that I couldn't hit, but I hit him less than just about everybody else.
I'm watching it from shortstop. I can honestly tell you I've never seen a right-handed hitter swing and miss at so many pitches from a left-handed pitcher.
If Carl Hubble is to go down in baseball history as having the best screwball, and Sandy Koufax the best curveball, well, certainly Steve Carlton had the best slider.
After 24 seasons, Carlton retired with 4,136 strikeouts, the most at that time by a left-hander. If batters couldn't figure out his slider, his teammates had a similar problem with his unorthodox approach to life.
Sometimes they say that the world rotates a little bit different for left-handers, and I think Lefty was a good example of that. From time to time, we still sit down and have a little dinner, and I still don't understand what he talks about.
He was into Mideastern philosophy, a lot of crossword puzzles. The guys would be playing poker on the plane. He'd be listening to classical music and drinking wine.
I was walking through the locker room. The locker room was deserted, and Carlton is sitting there at a table eating this big piece of fish with a bottle of wine and a nice glass. He goes, "Hi, guys. Life's great, isn't it?"
The stuff he read, you'd look at the titles occasionally and go, never seen that book before.
If guys wanted to talk a little bit, they had to talk intellectual talk. It wasn't about broads, booze, or whatever. It was what was happening in the world today and what was going to happen in the future.
He was into why people were like they are. Communists, he says, they're surrounding us. And I mean, it was how he was going to have a home underground. You sort of take a step back and go, wow.
He tried to get me into conversations about these Zions and all these people that are running the world, and I couldn't handle it. I said, let's talk about something else. It was a little too weird for me.
He would lie on that training table for about a good 15 minutes or longer, all by himself prior to the game, and everybody thought he was taking a nap. He wasn't taking a nap. He was blocking out the hitter's part of the plate.
I'd see the pitches and concentrate on the particular number of victories I had picked out for that year. You keep focusing. And then pretty soon you start affecting what I understand now to be the quantum field.
For grassroots baseball kind of people, they didn't know what he was doing, you know. And then he would do something really weird or something eccentric, and you'd talk to them about it, and they'd say, well, that's lefty. That's lefty.
I remember once congratulating him on his 3rd Cy Young Award, and he said, well, I can accept that, but I really don't want to, because if I accepted that, that would put a boundary on me winning another one.
Lefty plugged into all that stuff, that inner peace, that inner calmness. You know, on one hand, we're saying, that's really weird. But if it works for him, you know, and he wins 20, we don't care what he does.
I was just a kid that's grown up on the edge of the Everglades. Raised pretty much on a farm, you know, just throwing rocks all the time and always developing the arm. No particular plan with it.
We used to go hunting in the Everglades, and the rabbits would come out. One time, the rifle jammed on him, and he got a rock, and I swear it was about a good 90 feet away. Left hand, got that sucker right in the head.
One of 3 children, Steve Carlton was born in Miami on December 22nd, 1944, to Ann and Joe, a maintenance worker at Pan American. At 12, Steve was introduced to organized baseball.
I didn't know anything about Little League. You know, I had a paper route, so I didn't have time to do that. And they pretty much literally took me down there, so you're going to try out for Little League.
We used to take off from school and go to the spring training games, and Steve just never seemed like he was interested in going. Steve was pretty inner-directed. I think he kind of filled up his own time on his own terms.
He was always further along mentally than other people. He liked to read The Prophet, other Eastern philosophies. He did believe that there was a better part of life that he could obtain by meditation.
I was reading Yogananda when I was 12 years old. It was fascinating. I just was naturally drawn to that.
He was just very focused. He could sit there on the bench and close his eyes, and he was oblivious about what was going on around him except for the game.
Coach was saying, you know, you can play pro ball. And I said, what's that? I wasn't into academia. You know, I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to go to college. Didn't know what I was going to do. I said, well, I got to focus on baseball.
After graduating from North Miami High School in 1963, Carlton signed with the Cardinals that October. In 1965, the angular 6'5", 20-year-old was called up to the majors.
When Steve first came up, he was a tall boy. In fact, I started calling him Tall Boy. He was just a skinny guy, young kid. You don't know which way they're going to go.
Steve Carlton played with Bob Gibson, and so Carlton certainly got to watch one of the great pitchers who ever lived.
Steve learned more from Gibson than he did from anybody. The way he went about his independent selection of pitches, his refusal to listen to meetings because nobody could pitch like he could.
Gibby was an excellent teacher, but not one-on-one, like verbally. I mean, just by watching his presence on the field.
Following Gibson's example, Carlton pitched with strength, focus, and intensity, winning 27 games over his first 2 full seasons. But if he was to pitch on the same level as his mentor, he would need another pitch. On an exhibition tour in Japan after the 1968 season, Carlton began tinkering with the slider. He tested it against Japan's version of Babe Ruth, the legendary Sadahara O.
He picks that front leg up like that, how he used to hit, and I threw that slider right in his ribs, you know, and it went poof like that. And he went, you know, he went like this, and the ball went like that, you know. I said, okay, that's a good pitch.
2 balls, 2 strikes. Here's the punch. He struck him out. He struck him out. He has banned 19, a new Major League record.
After winning 17 games in 1969, the next season Carlton went 10-19, leading the league in losses. Looking for a deeper focus on the mound, Carlton found it with the long-distance help of a night watchman in Arizona who was known only as Briggs.
This guy was sending him long letters containing snippets of deep philosophical writings by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer.
When I get to a town, there'd be letters at the hotel waiting for me and setting up how to think, and it really changed my approach to the game. I was into philosophy. I'd read a lot of that stuff that he had sent me, but I'd never really applied it to baseball.
Carlton produced his first of 6 20-win seasons in 1971. The next spring, he asked Cardinals owner Gussie Busch for a $65,000 contract. Busch offered $57,500. Carlton held out.
Steve called me one night and said, they're not going to give me the money. I'm going to go ahead and sign tomorrow morning. So I'll be flying in tomorrow morning. Will you pick me up at the airport? Next morning, 8 o'clock, they traded Steve Carlton to the Phillies before he had a chance to come in and sign the contract with the Cardinals. The Philly fans don't know how lucky they were.
In 1972, he captured the town, Super Steve, and he did everything for us that year. All kinds of media stories into his personal life, his background, his philosophy of positive thinking.
In the off-season after that year, he hit the banquet circuit, and when he reported to spring training, he was in terrible shape.
I didn't have the opportunity to work out with weights like I normally do. In spring training, I got sick, and I think it really hurt.
Because he wasn't winning as many games, the media began to write about what he did away from the ballpark as an excuse for why the Phillies weren't winning.
Leading the media's off-site investigation of Steve Carlton was sports writer Bill Conlon.
If I walk into a hotel bar at 3 o'clock in the morning and he's in a unsober condition, it's not my business, but it's the fans' business and it's the reader's business.
Bill probably precipitated the whole thing. We were good buddies. And we'd have beers together, and he was my next-door neighbor in spring training. He took some of that stuff. He crossed over the line.
I wrote things that he considered terribly personal. I took the opposite view. I thought they were terribly relevant and explained better than anything else why this magnificent pitcher had gone from 27 wins to 20 losses.
I seen him drink less like anybody else. Was it excessive? I didn't see it. I didn't see it at all.
Other guys, they'd get mad at the press, and the next day they'd be best buddies. I'm going like, that's hypocritical to me. I said, you know, write what you want. I don't care if it's the truth. It just don't bother me.
Carlton denied that alcohol affected his performance and stopped talking to Conlon by the end of the 1973 season. Soon after, he drew a curtain of silence between himself and the press that lasted for the rest of his career.
He didn't feel like he owed it to them to speak to them, or he owed it to the fans to, to explain what went on the field that day.
We had an AP writer in Philadelphia named Ralph Bernstein, and every year in spring training, he'd go up to Lefty and say, look, Steve, no notebook, no pen. Can we talk about it? Ralph, policy is policy. You know it.
Don't forget, a policy is a policy. And he'd walk away. And then we go to Tim McCarver.
Barbara Walters offered him $25,000 to talk to him after the 1980 series. He turned it down. He just was not interested.
His 300th game win, he was going to break a silence. And that became more of the story than the 300th game. All the media was in the locker room. And he went out back by the showers, came out through the door and locked the media into the locker room and left and went home.
I had bought an old Mercedes, and I started talking to him about the car. And we talked about it for about 10, 15 minutes. And he finally looked at me and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Pat Jordan, I'm a writer and all that." And he pulled back from me and he says, "Oh, I don't ever talk to writers." And he ran into the clubhouse.
He almost became like a boy in the blue bubble. You know, it created a great sense of insularity for him, a great sense of inner peace.
Between 1976 and 1978, Carlton won 59 games, collected his second Cy Young Award, and led the Phillies to 3 straight division titles. Having found the right mental balance on the mound, he collaborated with trainer Gus Heffling and increasingly sought to hold back time with a regimen drawn from antiquity.
Lefty had the ability to
call upon his own mental and physical resources more so than most people do. He's a very in tune individual to his own body and mind.
Hefling started pounding the Oriental philosophy. The body is your temple. He really did straighten out as far as his social life went.
He became a physical fitness freak. Lefty, on days he didn't pitch, could be found, in a back room somewhere going through all these martial arts moves and stretching and strength training.
He would bury his arm into a garbage can filled with rice and go from the top and drive his hand down in and start working his hand at the bottom of the barrel, which was almost impossible to get down in the first place.
We'd see the cans of rice that he would just stick his hands in. It was like, what? And I go like that, and my fingers about up to my first knuckle, and I just almost break them.
I remember in spring training, he came back to the condo, and he had a bow with a spear tip for a deer, and he put it to his throat, and he bent the bow until it snapped. I thought he was going to pierce his neck. It scared me to death.
It wasn't simply a matter of mind over matter with Steve, because his matter mattered. He was big, and he was strong and talented. What separated him, however, was from the neck up.
It was just like, tunnel vision, totally devoid of emotion, because emotion was subjectivity. And the training was to remove yourself emotionally from it.
You'd run in and talk to him, and it was just him and the glove and the catcher, and he didn't know who was hitting. Sometimes he didn't even know your name. To look at the back of your jersey.
There was one time he set a record, and we put up on our big message board, Lefty just blah, 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 blah. He stepped back off the mound, tipped his hat. I could tell he was pissed about it.
In 1980, Carlton won his third Cy Young Award and led the Phillies to their only World Series title. Although he was the winning pitcher in the decisive Game 6, it was the energetic reliever Tug McGraw and not the stoic Carlton who was on the mound for the final out.
If he would have finished that game, I can't imagine him jumping up and down. It's curious to think about what he would have done in that moment of victory. Probably nothing.
Steve Carlton should be a very wealthy man today, because he made a lot of money during his career based on the wages of that era.
But it was not to be. In the early 1980s, rumors surfaced about improper financial activities conducted by Carlton's longtime agent, David Landfield.
Schmitty had the same agent for a while. Schmitty saw it before Lefty did and got out. You'd go to Lefty and you'd tell him what you heard. And he would have a hard time believing you because nobody would dare mess with him.
We're investing money, at car dealerships, other businesses. I was employing people. I was trying to do the right thing.
In 1983, the pitcher fired Landfield and filed suit in Philadelphia U.S. District Court, accusing his former agent of embezzling.
His accountant told me one time when he came out of the courthouse, he walked over to the hall and he banged his head against the concrete wall because he was so angry about the way it was going.
In 1985, they reached an out-of-court settlement, but a year later, Landfield filed for bankruptcy, effectively blocking Carlton from regaining any of the $175,000 still owed him. All told, it was estimated by the Philadelphia Daily News that the agent cost Carlton close to $4.5 million. On the field, the great left-hander was well into his final phase. He didn't have a winning season his final 4 years.
I think that what Dave Landfield did to Steve Carlton is a big reason that he tried to stay around as long as he did, because maybe he was hoping for 1 or 2 or 3 big paydays because he didn't have the resources that he thought he had.
All of us were, obviously aware of his, of the tools deteriorating. Very difficult to look him eye to eye and tell him that.
I went to his apartment in downtown Philadelphia twice and explained to him, I don't want to see you not being great. I want you to retire because you should not be released. And he said, I'm not going to retire. I'm going to pitch till I'm 50 years old.
The Steve Carlton era has ended in Philadelphia. One of the greatest pitchers of all time will no longer be pitching. in Philadelphia.
After his release from the Phillies in June of 1986, Carlton held on for 2 more seasons, compiling an 11-21 record with 4 different teams.
I remember watching him in a hotel room on a game, and I'm going, God, Lefty, retire, please retire. But he felt he could compete even without his best stuff.
The Twins released him in 1988. And a year later, Carlton and his wife Beverly moved to a ranch in Durango, Colorado. In 1994, after being voted into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot, he granted an interview to Philadelphia Magazine.
He didn't want to talk about baseball that much. He had this thing about not talking about the past. I mean, like at one point he said he didn't have a wristwatch, he didn't believe in time, didn't believe in birthdays. I just casually mentioned that I just bought a new pistol. He said, you know, you better put all your guns in PVC pipe and bury them because the government is coming in black helicopters to confiscate everybody's gun.
Quoting Carlton as saying that 12 Jewish bankers meeting in Switzerland rule the world, and the Russian and U.S. governments fill the air with low-frequency sound waves meant to control us, Jordan characterized Carlton as a zealot living in a mountainside bunker.
It's a bunker, huh? I remember that one. That was good. I live in an earth home that is powered by solar. What's the problem with that? I'm helping the environment. There were a lot of distortions. It's sad because people can do that to you. You know, you give them exposure and then they can just take their shots.
Wasn't him. Don't know where it came from. I don't know why the guy wrote it. He knows what he believes, and I know what he believes, and he just put it behind him, moved on.
I said, that's Steve being Steve. I really did. I mean, he'll come up with off-the-wall stuff. If you knew him, you knew he wasn't nuts. He might have been a little different, but he wasn't nuts.
Maybe it was just as well that he didn't talk during his year. He might have said a lot more that might have caused him embarrassment.
In 1998, Carlton and his wife divorced after 33 years of marriage. In the fall of 2000, policy was still policy when he withdrew himself from consideration after interviewing for the position of pitching coach of the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Faced with the reality of doing this for 8 months, and I realized that I didn't want to do it. It's this very claustrophobic feeling, and that's not the way I live my life.
I once said about Steve years ago that when Steve ends his career, he'll probably be a hunting guide up in the mountains and nobody will ever see him. He hasn't done that, but I think he's done something similar to that in that very few people ever see him.
At his Hall of Fame induction in 1994, Carlton addressed his buttoned-up relationship with the media by commenting that being silent all those years did have its downside. There was no better example of that downside than a photo of the 1987 World Champion Twins with President Reagan, which appeared in the St. Paul Pioneer Press. The caption named every player except one. A tall man in dark glasses was described as an unidentified Secret Service agent. That man was Steve Carlton. For SportsCentury, I'm Chris Fowler.